This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for September 11th, 12 noon. We have two systems we're tracking in the Atlantic. Tropical Storm Maria, which you see here in the animation using the HurTrack program, and Tropical Storm Nate, which made landfall early this morning just north of Veracruz, Mexico. Here's the future forecast of Maria. The system continues moving northwest, then north, and should pass just to the west of Bermuda next week. Now, the system did pass over St. Martin, Guadalupe, and Antigua, so those are going to be considered as tropical storm hits from Maria in the Hurricane City database. Even though most of the high winds were out over the open water, they did not really get much high winds on the islands. So it looks like good news on Maria. It's not going to hit land as an organized system, and it should pass out into the open Atlantic. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at Nate over here and zoom in on what happened this morning with Nate. And the system made landfall just north of Veracruz, Mexico. And let's go ahead and let's go ahead and show you the entire past track of the system. It bobbled around, shifted north south. The models had a little bit of a hard time trying to deal with this system, but eventually they came into agreement that this was going to move into Mexico. And sure enough, early this morning around 7 a.m., there's our point of impact right there. Makes landfall in Veracruz, just north of Veracruz, Mexico, as a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Try to get some localized information from Veracruz by clicking on the Mexico on the Hurricane City tracking map, and then clicking on Veracruz, and you can get the local news from the area. But they have so much information about the 9/11 ceremonies taking place right now that they really don't have much information about what's happening with Tropical Storm Nate. But I'm sure over the coming days we'll hear about any potential rainfall and flooding that they had up in that area. But the system is dissipating pretty quickly, so it should be out of their hair pretty quick down in Mexico. All right, here's what's going on with the wind shear in the Atlantic. We have a high-pressure ridge which would normally be over the top of a developing system, which would prevent the wind shear from tearing a system up, is to the south down here of Maria. And we have an upper level low to the north of Maria, and the combination of the two is causing about 20 to 30 knots of shear through Maria, and that's why the system is not developing. It's a very lopsided system. The center of circulation is just off the northeast coast of the Virgin Islands and moving off to the northwest. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to find itself in a more favorable environment in the coming days. Let's go ahead and take a look at the trends on the wind shear. The wind shear remains high northeast of the system, but as you go northwest, we have falling wind shear values out here, so this should go ahead and at least become a hurricane, but it's not going to strengthen rapidly because the high pressure that should be over the top of the system is off to the south, and it's by the time it gets its act together, it'll probably be getting up into cooler waters here west of Bermuda, and then the wind shear will really get strong up here, and it'll shear the system apart. But it could become a Category 1 hurricane before all said and done, passing off harmlessly into the open Atlantic. So it's good news. We're not going to have to deal with Nate or Maria. They're both inland, or Nate is inland, and Maria will be soon heading out to sea. And we'll start focusing on what's coming up behind these two systems. But let's get to some more images here. Little bit of, well, here, first of all, here are all the models on Maria, and the consensus now is that this is going to move north and out into the open Atlantic. Now, in the last update video I did, the UK Met and the GFDL model wanted to take this towards the western Bahamas and put a threat possibly to Florida. In the last update video, we talked about the potential for the disruption of the Monday Night Football game coming up, and if there were watches and warnings. Well, that's not going to be a concern anymore because the models are all in agreement now. This is heading out into the open Atlantic. All right, here is the best performing model on Maria so far, and this is the GFDN model. Now, this is the Navy's version of the GFDL model. They run their own version of the GFDL, and it performed very well on this system, Maria. Going out 96 hours, it was only off by an average of 90.1 miles, which is pretty good. And you can see it's very close to the official forecast track, and the National Hurricane Center is obviously going with the GFDN model, off by 90 miles, and that has it well west of Bermuda. Now, as far as Nate, here are the models going back to Wednesday, September 7th, and this is kind of a fun thing to do, is go back and look at the models and how they performed on a particular system. And these are always down at the bottom of Hurricane City, where the current advisories are displayed in the advisory boxes below the tracking chart, and you can get the model history on each threatening system. And if the system's not going to be a threat, we don't keep track of the models. But systems that are going to be a threat, we generally keep track of them and then erase them once the system is over, unless it becomes a benchmark system, and then we keep the model history up for forever so people can see how the models perform. But on this particular storm, Nate, the GFS and the NOGAPS model did the best. They had it coming in right near Veracruz, Mexico, whereas the Canadian and the LBAR model wanted to take it up into the northern Gulf Coast. So, and then the ECMWF had a couple of different runs where it took it up in the northern Gulf, and then a couple of runs that took it back just south of Texas. But those models did not pan out. The GFS and the NOGAPS were the shiners on this one, and they had it going into Veracruz. And you ask, what were the best performing models on Maria? Well, here is September 6th. This is going last Tuesday, and this is where the system is right now. So the GFS nailed the system. Again, the GFS did very good on both of these systems as far as the global models are concerned, and the GFS had it just northeast of the northern Leeward Islands right around this time, and here we are. So it's done a very good job, the GFS, on this track. So keep that in mind for the next set of storms that are out there. GFS has had a pretty good track record the last few storms. All right, let's take a look at a water vapor loop of the Atlantic Basin, and you can see that we have really nothing coming up behind Maria. We had a wave out here in the mid-Atlantic that looked pretty good, but if you notice in the last few frames, in fact, let me stop this, we have a big, huge upper level low out here around 40, I think this is around 40 west, and we have very strong wind shear out of the southwest, and it took this wave out here that was looking pretty decent 24 hours ago, and it's just absolutely annihilated it. And none of the models right now are really predicting much out here. Now, there's another blob down here that we're watching, but that too could also run into some wind shear. And then we have this system, this upper level low tangling with Maria out here, and we have also a sharp trough through the Gulf of Mexico. So things are not very favorable in the Atlantic. So we might go through a period here of maybe a week or 10 days where we don't really have much to talk about. And then we'll have a secondary peak of the hurricane season, which happens every year in late September and goes through October. So we have a long way to go yet. We're really racing through the list of names. The next name on the list is Ophelia, and we'll see if we have any development out there for Ophelia. But right now, things are quiet in the Atlantic Basin with the exception of Maria, which should be a fish storm in the next few days. So that's it for now. We'll be back with another update in several days from now once we get an idea what the future holds. But right now, the models are pretty quiet for any development in the next several days. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.